When I started my healing journey, I did what most people do. I found all the things that were wrong with me and worked on fixing them. I tried every healing technique, every modality, everything I could do to release my issues. And it seemed like the more things I fixed, the more things there were to fix. And that's when I realized I was doing personal development all wrong. So I'm going to share with you the mistake that most people make with personal development, what you can do instead so you can actually have the inner peace you're looking for. I'm Nicola, and I've been stuffing around with personal development my whole life. And I've made all the mistakes, but I think along the way I've learned a thing or two that might just help you out. I remember working with a well-known EFT healer many years ago. He was out in Australia on tour and we booked sessions with him and we were tapping through stuff. And for me, my biggest issue was security, tapping through issues of security. And I vividly remember asking him something along the lines of, so when does all this stuff get sorted out? Which in hindsight is kind of funny, but at the time I was deadly serious. I really wanted to know, when does this stuff all get fixed and go away? And I'll never forget his response. He said, there's always more stuff. There are always more layers to uncover. And I was gutted. I was devastated. I wanted to know, when is this end point coming where I've done everything and I've fixed everything and everything's neatly squared away? That's really what I wanted from this process. I thought if I did it enough, I would get to a point where everything was fixed. But over the years since, I realized what happens instead is that there is a core of us that never changes, and the work that we do simply allows us to express that differently. The reasons we do things change, the why behind what we do change, the way that we do things changes when we do this work. And in my case, it might be that security is still important to me. It might be that I still want to get things all squared away, but the way that I do that and my reasons for wanting that, my motivation for doing that changes. It comes from a much more constructive, whole place. And the mistake that we make, the trap that we all fall into, is thinking that we're broken and that we need fixing. But when we take this approach, what it means is that we're assuming there's something wrong with me. And this is a form of self-rejection. And that takes us in the wrong direction. And when we take this approach, what we're doing is we're constantly looking for the next thing to fix, finding the next problem. And surprise, surprise, there's always another thing to fix. There's always another problem to solve, because our focus is on finding problems, finding things to fix. And we'll always keep finding them if we keep looking for them. Have you ever done this? I sure have. And so when we take this approach, what we're doing is we're chasing better instead of authentic. We're trying to be a better person instead of being the person we already are, because inside of you, under maybe some layers of stuff, there is already an amazing version of you. How do I know that? Because I've never met anyone who didn't have that amazing version already in there. Sure, some people who behaved badly, it was hard to see, but there would be moments, glimpses where that version, that better version, would sneak out and you would get to see it. Everyone I've ever met has that better version inside of themselves. So personal development is all about figuring out who you already are at your core. It's about figuring out what matters most to you, what's important to you, what's not important to you, what your values are. And then once you know that, being intentional about your actions and your choices, being conscious about what you do and making sure it lines up with who you already know you are. And then with that, expressing the best possible version of yourself right here, right now, not waiting until you become a better version, but expressing the version of you, the best version of you that you have access to right here, right now. So instead of about fixing stuff, it's actually about growing into you in the present moment, being the best version of you right here, right now. So how do we approach personal development from this new perspective and this new way of thinking about it? Well, first, we have to shift from this idea that we're improving what's wrong to instead embracing what's right. So it's about self-acceptance, looking at who we are and accepting that without judgment, without criticism, without shoulds. I should do this, I should be that, I shouldn't do that, I shouldn't be this. Embracing who we are fully right here, right now. And journaling is a great way to really build this awareness of who we are and accepting who we are. And I've got a guide with a bunch of journaling prompts that you might want to download to help you with that. And it's also about not rejecting yourself, but instead getting really curious about who you are, getting really curious about what makes you tick, seeking to understand yourself. And I've got a whole video on developing your self-awareness that you might want to watch after this one. But we want to get really curious and ask ourselves lots of questions, both why and what questions. Why questions are great because they help us understand our motivation and how we got to where we are. And what questions are great because they help us focus on where we want to go. What do we want to happen next? They're future focused or solution focused. And those both kinds of questions can be really helpful in understanding who we are. But to do this effectively, we need to give ourselves time to rest and reflect. We can't be constantly doing, because we don't have time to ask and answer these questions effectively. We're also not chasing perfection, but instead we're choosing a direction. So we're not aiming for some ideal outcome. Instead, we're looking at, okay, where do I want to head? We want to be making progress, but in the right direction towards the things that are important to us, that are in line with our values, and we need to give it time. These things, unfortunately, don't happen instantaneously. We need to allow them to unfold. If I look back to where I was 6 months ago, I don't feel like maybe I've made a huge amount of progress, but I look back 5 or 10 years, I've made a huge amount of progress. I'm nothing like the person I was 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. So we're aiming for that progress and we need to give it time to unfold. We can also practice making decisions as our best self. So we can imagine this best version of ourselves that is already inside of us and say, what would they do in this situation? What would they choose? How would they act? And that can help us access that and be that best version of ourselves in this very moment. And in all of this, there are 2 central ideas. The first one is, I am enough exactly as I am, right here, right now. And I am constantly learning and growing. And this is one of those divine paradoxes or a divine dichotomy where we have 2 seemingly incompatible things that exist simultaneously and they do actually work together. One of the ways to practice this idea is gratitude. And I've got a guide with a bunch of gratitude prompts that you might want to download. But when you're doing your gratitude practice to implement this idea, you want to focus both on what you did well and also what you're still learning and create a balance between those things. See the things in your life that went really well and the things that you are getting better at constantly. And by being grateful and appreciating both of those things, we create that balance in our lives. I can tell you from personal experience that when you shift your approach to personal development in this way, when you stop trying to fix everything that's broken and you start celebrating everything that's right with you, things just work so much better. Everything gets easier and more enjoyable. You get more of what you want. You're more authentic, you're happier, and you still do learn and grow. It's just in a more constructive, healthy way. So tell me, if you stopped trying to fix yourself and instead tried to express the best version of yourself in this current moment, what would change first? And to understand how to develop your self-awareness even further so you can embrace everything that's right about you, watch this video next. Got questions? Comment below, and I'll see you in the next one.